everyone, and welcome to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Tanya.
I'm Josh.
And today it's Josh's turn, and I know nothing about this case. He is letting nothing slip. All I know is apparently it's going to be a wild ride. So, buckle up or switch it off. Those are the only options.
Standard.
Honestly, that's what you're getting at the start of every episode from now on. You can either buckle up or you can switch it off and fucking play with yourself or something. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
This episode is not sponsored by Love Honey.
Or Durex.
Don't be a fool,
Well, I
wrap that
suppose
too.
you can't really use Durex if you're playing with yourself, unless you're, I don't know, into some strange kinky stuff.
I find Durex quite expensive.
They're very expensive.
I bought a box of like 100 condoms from a different brand off of Amazon for like €15, and they're still a good brand. I mean, about 4 of the 100 have been used because I'm reckless. But
Remember how I used to carry condoms for you in my handbag on nights out?
Anyway, like she said, welcome to this week's episode of Twisted Talks.
Like, don't call me out like that. I'm actually not going to, because I know you're going to call me out in return, and you're much harsher than I am. And I would cry. All right, Michael Jackson.
So anyway, this week's episode, what I'm covering, there's a little bit of politics, well, actually quite a lot of politics, but
Are you going to be explaining the politics? Because you know I don't understand politics.
no, there's not really, like,
There's no need to...
there isn't really any need for any of it to be explained in the parts where it comes up. It's just, I'm trying to describe without giving anything away, because I'm starting this kind of case in, like, story format, I suppose would be the best way to say it. So I'm just going to dump.
Just get into it.
I'm going to take a dump.
Ew.
I'm just going to jump.
I'm just going to jump right in.
Right in.
On in.
So those, some of you, I will say this is the story, I suppose the case in regards to Otto Warmbier or Warmbier. I'm not sure. I'm assuming if there was a bit of French to it, it'd be Warmbier. So it's the one or the other, but I don't know if there's any French to it because they're an all-American family.
Oh, yeah.
So
His name is Otter?
Otto.
Oh, you said Otter. I was very confused.
Oh, did I?
Yes.
I think it's because
You're thinking about otters? They're really
no,
cute.
I'm thinking about how Dawn used to call me Joshua Otter.
Oh my god, she did! Maeve used to call you Josh McCott.
Josh McCott.
McCott.
I remember that,
Yeah,
actually.
I don't know, she couldn't wrap her head around Joshua Cott.
But, I've had many different names. Bitch. Cunt.
Or
Anyway, but yeah, this is the story of Otto Warmbier. So, do you know what? Some of you might be familiar if you've heard of the case before or seen anything about it. But I'm just going to start from early life, go into and you'll see what happens as it goes on if you're not already familiar with
tell
it.
me the story.
So, moving on.
Moving on.
Moving
You're
on.
not moving in with me.
Ew.
I mean, I have a spare bedroom, but no.
No, I don't want to hear you and your boyfriend.
Also, I live in the middle of nowhere. You'd just be stuck in the house all the time because you don't drive.
But I have birds.
My cats would eat the birds.
No, they would be banned from that room.
The dog can open the door, though.
It will be deadbolted. From both sides.
From both sides.
No one can get in and I cannot get out. You can bring me food through the window. I will revolute you the money every week on a Wednesday.
Fair enough.
So anywho. So, starting off, Otto Warmbier, which is how I'm going to pronounce it, probably wrong, but anywho, was born on the 12th of December 1994 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He attended Wyoming High School, where he was a gifted varsity soccer player and swimmer. He was also crowned prom king at homecoming, and I've just made the microphone fall over. Hi guys.
That was my sleeve.
He was also crowned prom king at homecoming, and in 2013 he graduated.
It's Rick and Morty. Did I graduate yet?
Graduated as salutatorian. This is the term for a student who was ranked second highest in a graduating class, and they address and welcome everyone at the graduation.
Okay, so it's like you're just below the valedictorian.
Yes.
Interesting. I never knew that. You've taught me something.
I forgot the valedictorians were a thing, so yeah. You've reminded me of something. We've zoomed out. So a classmate of Otto's later wrote in a newspaper that despite Otto being in the popular circle, given his athletic prowess, classic good looks, unending charisma, he still felt like someone that was everyone's friend.
Okay.
So, not your classic American jock douche that you see on a television show.
Yeah.
He was a stand-up guy from what people say. And even though his family were well off, he still had a passion and enjoyed shopping in thrift stores, which he called memorabilia investing. I love that.
I love that.
Otto would sometimes dress in, say, some nice second-hand Hawaiian shirts that he found in the thrift stores. He obviously liked the vibe.
Stylish man.
We love it. When it was time to give his speech at high school graduation, he didn't, give some grand speech. He admitted that he'd actually struggled to find words for it. And as the theme for his speech, he took a quote from The Office. I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
That's cute.
After finishing high school, Otto went on to continue his education on a scholarship at the University of Virginia, where he was studying for a double major degree in economics and commerce with a minor in global sustainability. So, brainy boy.
We love, oh my god, I can't think of the word.
Like, so smart.
We love an eco-conscious king.
Yes. It is said that Otto knew long before his college peers what he wanted to do professionally, which was investment banking. He joined a fraternity which was supposedly known for its quote-unquote kind of nerdy dudes. And
okay, so he found his tribe.
yes, he was also smart. One of his friends from college said that academics and family were always his priority over everything else. So,
He really had his head on straight.
Yeah, exactly. He really kind of knew what he wanted. He obviously was an ambitious person, knew what he wanted to achieve and was willing to put in the work to achieve it, while also being, I suppose, like... I know people normally say family man when it's in a husband way.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say family man as in, son
really
caring about his parents, friends, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oriented, yeah. In 2014, Otto, whose mother is Jewish, went on a birthright trip to Israel. After he got back from the trip, he started to get more involved and active in his campus Hillel at the University of Virginia. Now, Hillel is the foundation for Jewish campus life and is represented at over 550 colleges and communities throughout North America as well as globally.
Lovely.
Going off of Otto's LinkedIn profile, which was referenced in one of the articles I have referenced, he was on the committee of a student investment fund, and he travelled to London in 2015 to complete a course in advanced econometrics at the London School of Economics. So, he was willing to go to travel out of his way, I suppose, to further his education, to get the career he wanted and whatnot.
Fair play to him.
I would not be able for any of that. Well done. So Otto decided to take a quick break, which he booked through a Chinese-based independent travel operator called Young Pioneer Tours. They promoted their tours as budget travel to, quote, destinations your mother would rather you stayed away from, unquote. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, but especially when you hear the places. The agency offers package tours to locations like Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, but most people go to them for their trips to North Korea, formerly known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Okay,
so also probably places your country would rather you stayed away from. Otto had booked a 5-day trip to North Korea. It was a New Year's package. With Young Pioneer Tours, and found out from the confirmation email that his visa would be arranged by the company and given to him when he met the group at the airport in Beijing. So I'm assuming, obviously he'd fly from America to Beijing, and then that's where the Young Pioneer Tours would give the visa, everything would be sorted, and then they'd fly from there to North Korea.
Okay.
The US State Department had an advisory in place against travelling to North Korea, where he would be on the American government's power to directly help him. Or any American for that matter.
So he would be on or be beyond?
Beyond.
Okay, sorry.
So out of...
they would have no jurisdiction there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They'd have no control. They don't even have an embassy there.
Yeah, the American relations with North Korea aren't
No,
great,
no
to be
bueno.
fair.
Never have been, never will be. I don't think, to be honest.
Sorry, this is totally off topic, but I saw on Instagram the other day, I don't want to say for sure that it was North Korea, but I'm pretty sure it was North Korea, ordered a bunch of Volvo cars from Sweden. And Sweden shipped the cars over, and North Korea just ignored the invoice and never paid the bill, and it's apparently the biggest case of Grand Theft Auto in history or something.
I would not be surprised if that was
Now, I don't know
Korea.
how true that is, take it with a grain of salt. Like I said, I saw it on Instagram.
It's not part of the case, so it's not something that's been researched.
I think I saw on Archbishop of Banterbury.
I find it entertaining, some of the stuff they be posting, whether it's true or just memes.
Yeah.
It
was either that or Scottish patter, I'm not sure. But anyway,
they're good too.
Continue.
Otto's parents, as you would expect, were not exactly happy about the trip, but his mother later explained, why would you say no to a kid like this? And I was kind
Yeah.
of like, you know, Otto wouldn't be the type to get in any trouble, so his
No,
parents
he's
wouldn't have
like-
any real reason to try and stop him from going on the
Exactly,
trip.
like he seems very, very sensible. He doesn't
Yeah.
seem like the type that's going to arse around and land himself in trouble or like go
Exactly.
over specifically to cause trouble.
Yeah.
Like it really seems like he just
He
wanted
is
a
the
break.
type of person who wanted to go and see the culture and see new
Yeah,
places and things like
yeah.
that. So Otto was actually also due to go to Hong Kong for a week-long finance course that was sponsored by the University of Virginia after his trip in North Korea.
Okay.
So his plan was to fly to Hong Kong after North Korea for the course before flying back to Wyoming and Ohio where his family still lived.
Yep.
But sadly that's not how things would unfold.
Okay.
Now, I'm assuming that means that with Young Pioneer Tours, everyone in the Young Pioneer Tour group would have flown back to Beijing and then he would have gone from there to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Because I know, as we'll get into, everyone that was on the trip would have been flying back on the same plane, so obviously
Yeah.
back to Beijing before going wherever they were all going. Soon after Christmas of 2015, I think it was supposed to be around the 29th, but pinch of
around
salt.
your birthday.
Same day, I think it was, but I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. So Otto met the Young Pioneers in China, in Beijing, and they all boarded an old Soviet jet to Pyongyang. Upon arrival in North Korea's capital, the border police took everyone's cameras and went through each file on their smartphones to ensure that nobody entering the country was trying to smuggle in subversive materials.
Oh yeah, because North Korea is very, very strict.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah, like-
very, very, very strict.
Anything that's not part of the North Korean regime cannot be brought in on your phone, like.
So does that mean? Sorry, does that mean you'd have to delete like certain apps and things before you go over?
Probably. You basically, to be honest, if I was
Wild.
ever going, which I never plan to and never will, but if I was ever going, I think I'd just buy a new phone with nothing on it just to
Yeah.
be safe. I don't fancy getting arrested for, I don't know,
Having Snapchat
the
or
Bible
something,
on my
or-
phone. Not that that would
Oh,
ever happen
God.
of all things,
Yeah.
unless I wanted to quote it and why
Bible
it's wrong. But anyway,
Or like a
or
meme.
misinterpreted.
Or like a meme of what's his name? Kim
Jong-un.
That's what would get me in trouble.
Probably same. So yeah, to go through the phone, whatever. After this, they went through passport control and left the airport. Given the way North Korea is governed and run, you could also say that leaving the airport was leaving the free world. To be honest, basically,
Like they're entering
essentially.
a dictatorship.
Yeah. Early on in their trip, Otto and the other Young Pioneer tourists were led onto the USS Pueblo, an old American Navy ship that was seized by North Koreans in 1968 and now served as a tourist attraction. During the tour of the ship, they were entertained by a North Korean who told the tourists about the ship being captured from an quote-unquote imperial enemy. The 82 American sailors that were captured on the ship when it was confiscated were beaten and starved for 11 months before they were finally released.
Oh my god.
It was made clear now to Otto and probably other American tourists what they had overlooked. They had now entered into enemy territory.
Yeah.
Even though the Korean War had stalemated in 1953, there was no peace agreement, meaning that North Korea was technically still at war with the South, and therefore the US is their allies with the South. Danny Grattan, a British man who was in his 40s and was Otto's roommate for the tour, said Otto was a little bit shocked when they departed from the old Navy boat. Understandably, after hearing
Yes.
all that. The group of tourists was a mix of Canadians, Australians, Europeans. There was some Brits, I think, as well as at least one other American. Danny and the other tourists helped Otto to laugh off what they had learned and nicknamed him Imperial Enemy. Not long later, Otto was back to enjoying himself despite the fact there was propaganda billboards that showed North Korea missiles blasting the White House.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
The tour seemed more like a crazy charade than a visit to a hostile nation.
Yeah, like that's got to be wild. Like with him being American,
Yeah.
and growing up in America. to go
Like, that's
somewhere-
wild to me, even. Like,
Yeah, like it's wild to me. Even just thinking like he's gone somewhere where he is essentially probably viewed by quite a lot of people as the enemy. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that everyone in North Korea
No.
views America as the enemy because I know that's not the case.
But those that are, like, I suppose, in government and in politics and are,
or those that
in
are,
my
like,
opinion,
really invested,
brainwashed.
Brainwashed, yeah.
So, yeah. The Young Pioneers visited the 70-foot bronze statues of the first two generations of the country's dictators, and they couldn't tell for sure if the citizens that they saw randomly hailing the great leader were genuine or had been put up to it.
God.
Everyone was aware that outside of the capital were starving villages and concentration camps, but Otto successfully... Yeah.
I was only thinking a minute ago I really need to educate myself on North Korea, but there's concentration camps.
Oh yeah, to this day. Like, punishment for small things can be hard labour camps.
Oh my god.
Yup. And if you're shocked now.
Oh Jesus. Right, continue. Shock me.
Yeah, so concentration camps, but Otto successfully bridgeted.
Bridged.
No, I'm saying Bridgeted because it's it is or was St. Bridget's Day. Was it yesterday? Or is it?
Yeah, it was Imbolc. I think Imbolc is St. Bridget's Day.
Yeah, I think so. Bridged the cultural divide as best he could, laughing and throwing snowballs at North Korean children. So,
having a laugh.
Yeah. Integrating to an extent. On New Year's Eve, the Young Pioneers group went for drinks at what's described as a fancy bar. Danny Grattan said that none of them got belligerently drunk, even though some reports would later try to suggest they had.
They were obviously keeping their wits about them.
Yeah,
they knew that they weren't somewhere that was necessarily safe.
Exactly. Danny explained that when they were done at the bar, they celebrated the final hours of New Year's Eve with thousands of North Koreans in Pyongyang's main square before returning to their hotel. The hotel was known as the Alcatraz of Fun because of its island location. The hotel was 47 stories, and to keep foreigners and tourists entertained, it had 5 restaurants, one of which was a revolving restaurant, a bar, a sauna, a massage parlour, and even its own bowling alley.
Cool.
Some of the Young Pioneers group went to the bar. Danny Grattan went bowling and lost track of Otto. It was only later that Danny wondered about the 2-hour window that none of them could account for Otto. Whatever happened during those 2 hours, when Danny returned to the room, him and Otto shared at about 4:30 a.m. on what would now be the 1st of January 2016. Otto was there and already asleep.
Okay.
The next morning, technically, because it was the 1st, so the next morning, January 2nd, 2016, at the airport, getting ready to go back to Singapore, Otto and Danny were the last of the Young Pioneers to show their passports. They were side by side at a single desk. After quite some time, Danny had noticed that the officers were attentively examining the documents. Charlotte Guttridge, a tour leader at Young Pioneer Tours, noticed that Otto was taking longer than usual, so she started to walk over to him, but was told by an insistent airport official that she had to go through immigration immediately. Then, back at the desk where Otto and Danny were, 2 soldiers marched up, and one of the soldiers tapped Otto on the shoulder. Danny thought that the authorities just wanted to give an American, the imperial enemy, a hard time, and jokingly said, "Well, that's the last we'll ever see of you."
Oh God.
Otto laughed before allowing the soldiers to lead him away from Danny. Once Charlotte had gotten through passport control, she spotted that Otto was being led away by 2 uniformed officers. She called out to him, and he looked at her before he was led into a room off to the right of the desks. Otto seemed calm, which put Charlotte at ease initially. Do you know, she thought that maybe the officers were doing an inspection of his luggage or electronics, something that does happen there. Charlotte later told Reuters, a news agency, he wasn't dragged away and he wasn't yelled at. Charlotte stayed in the terminal until the final boarding call for their flight. Then somewhat anxiously she took her seat on the plane. A few minutes passed, and as the cabin crew began preparations for departure, word had spread that Otto still hadn't boarded the plane. The plane was about to be pushed back from the terminal when an official boarded the plane and approached Charlotte, telling her Otto is very sick and has been taken to the hospital.
He's sick.
Apparently, all of a sudden.
He's suddenly come down with a sickness.
Charlotte asked when he would be released and was told by the official tomorrow, maybe next week.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Could be tomorrow, could be next week. We'll let you know.
Soon after this, a North Korean contact informed Young Pioneers Tours founder Garrett Johnson of Otto's detention. Garrett was also in North Korea with a separate group who were due to get a train to the Chinese border. Garrett told Reuters, "I stayed back when I heard Otto had been detained. It was an automatic response. I wanted to try and work out the situation, and it was my hope that I would at least be able to speak with him." Garrett Johnson said his company was in touch with Otto's family, US officials, and the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang, which represents US interests in North Korea.
Okay.
Staff at Young Pioneer Tours said that as far as they knew, Otto had not been in possession of any religious or political literature. Foreign visitors have often been detained in the past for attempting to distribute religious literature in North Korea. The US and Canadian governments advised against travel to North Korea. The US State Department said in a statement that they were aware of reports that a US citizen had been detained in North Korea, but they gave no further details, citing privacy concerns. What is wrong with my voice today? I keep trying to talk like Groot. Not Groot. Gru.
Crew. Oh God.
So Robert King, who worked at the US State Department, went to work on January 2nd, 2016. And, he was expecting a, routine, boring day, going through emails that had gathered over the holidays. Instead, a red alert situation greeted him on his computer.
Beautiful.
Robert's first thought was, oh no, not another American.
And of course.
During Robert's 7 years as the Special Envoy for Korean human rights issues, he had helped oversee the safe release of over a dozen imprisoned Americans, so he knew what would happen. Mm-hmm. Robert knew that Otto would first be forced to confess to undermining the regime, and that tapes of that speech would be used as domestic propaganda to convince North Koreans that America sought to destroy them.
Oh, for God's sake.
After this, Otto was likely to be imprisoned and his freedom used as a bargaining chip by the North Koreans to extract a visit from a high-level American dignitary or concessions in nuclear or sanctions negotiations. In meetings with Otto's family, Robert warned them to expect a marathon, not a sprint. He also advised that they keep quiet to avoid antagonising the unpredictable regime.
Fair enough.
There was little Robert could offer Otto's family to reassure them, as they weren't 100% sure where Otto was or what had happened to him, as America has little intelligence assets in North Korea, so they can't find out much. Yeah. Understandably, Otto's family became frustrated that the world's most powerful nation couldn't take more direct and immediate action to help their son. Robert King has no leverage over Pyongyang. He couldn't even directly communicate with North Korean officials, as the US and North Korea have never had a formal diplomatic relationship. Mm-hmm. The Swedish... did you not mention something? Was that the story about the cars? Wasn't that Swedish?
Yeah, Sweden.
The Swedish ambassador stands in as Washington's liaison for American citizens in Pyongyang.
Oh, he put his annoyance over the cars aside.
Well,
I think it was
this was well before, I'd say.
I think it was in the... 60s, 70s?
Oh, it's an old thing.
Or maybe the 80s. It was, I don't know, 60s to 80s.
Well, then this would have been more modern.
I'll try to find it in a minute.
All Robert could do was wait for weeks while the Swedish embassy's emails and calls were stonewalled.
That's fucking horrible.
Around 3 weeks after Otto was detained, KCNA, North Korea's official news agency, said that Otto, quote-unquote, was caught committing a hostile act against the state, which KCNA claimed was tolerated and manipulated by the US government. The reports did not go into the nature of what his wrongdoing was, and no further information was given.
He's done something. I won't tell you what he's done, but he's done something.
Yeah.
So we're keeping him.
Charlotte Gutteridge said that Otto was not with the other tourists when the events that appear to have led to his arrest took place. Charlotte told Reuters that what happened at the hotel, and my belief is that Otto kept it to himself out of hope it might go unnoticed.
Okay.
Charlotte and her colleagues at Young Pioneer Tours declined to share any further details of exactly what had taken place, citing the safety of their client. 6 weeks after the KCNA news agency reports on the detaining of Otto after being caught committing a quote-unquote hostile act against the state, Otto appeared on state television looking sallow and dressed in a light jacket and navy-coloured slacks. In a fanciful and apparently forced forced confession, he revealed his quote-unquote crime.
Oh God. So what's he supposed to have done?
Otto said that the day before his departure he had attempted to steal propaganda signage from a staff-only area at the hotel he was staying in a scheme that was apparently thought up by a Methodist church in his hometown, a secret society at the University of Virginia, and the United States government. Bear in mind, why would it be from a Methodist church if he's Jewish?
Fucking joking.
But if he's Jewish, why would it be a Methodist church?
I was thinking the same thing. And as well, what has him stealing... What was the word you used? Something propaganda?
A propaganda poster, basically.
A propaganda poster. What has that got to do with a secret plan by the US?
Because basically to undermine the regime by taking down propaganda, that's a serious offence in Korea.
Oh my God, I take down one poster and suddenly I've undermined the dictator.
Oh yeah, but you take down one poster, you're going to a labour camp.
Yeah, that's fucking ridiculous. Side note, it was in the 1970s North Korea ordered...
Oh, it was well before all this then.
Ordered 1,000 Volvo cars from Sweden. The cars were shipped and delivered, but North Korea just didn't bother paying and ignored the invoice. Till this day, the bill remains unpaid, making it the largest car theft in history.
Weird. In his address, Otto said, "Please, people in the government of the DPR Korea, I beg that you see how I was used and manipulated. I have made the single worst decision of my life, but I am only human. I beg that you find it in your hearts to allow me to return home to my family." Otto also praised North Korea's quote-unquote humanitarian treatment of severe criminals, like himself. And at one stage of his 35-minute address, he described Pyongyang as an Eastern Jerusalem.
Sorry.
Yeah.
He's definitely reading it off a teleprompter.
Oh yeah, that was definitely scripted from them.
100%.
But I guess you do what you say, what you're told even.
Fuck.
Even if the official State Department response was impeded, that did not mean that a back channel couldn't be implemented. Shortly after Otto had been arrested, Ohio Governor John Kasich connected Otto's family with Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico and ambassador to the United Nations. Bill was leading a foundation that specialises in under-the-radar fringe diplomacy, which is basically like, trying to do things through basically more so unofficial channels and kind of work around things, as opposed to it being more of an official...
so trying to be a bit quicker.
Basically unofficially diplomatic, kind of, trying to maybe through working with businesses and through working with like other like nationals and things like that, and so trying to go about it in things the officials couldn't.
Yeah.
The official investigation couldn't go about it the ways they could.
Yeah.
So fringe diplomacy they'd undertake to release hostages from hostile regimes or criminal organisations. Bill Richardson had in the past helped to free several Americans from North Korea, and because of this had a strong relationship with what is commonly called the New York Channel, which is the North Korean representatives at the United Nations headquarters in Manhattan, who often serve as unofficial go-betweens for Washington and Pyongyang.
Right.
Every few weeks from February to August of 2016, Bill Richardson, or Mickey Bergman, his senior advisor, travelled to Manhattan to meet the New York Channel. In places near the United Nations, they would have polite negotiations with the regime's representatives. KCNA news agency announced that 21-year-old Otto had been sentenced to 15 years hard labour for subversive activities.
For taking down a poster!
Yeah. And bear in mind the CCTV footage of him taking down the poster is grainy, so I don't even know if it's him. It could have been him, but it could also have not been him and been staged.
That's fucking madness.
But do what you will. This sentence was reportedly given only hours after Bill Richardson had met with two diplomats from North Korea's UN office to push for Otto's release. Soon after Otto's conviction in Pyongyang, Bill Richardson sensed that the previously communicative foreign ministry was having its information cut off by Kim Jong-un's stubborn and headstrong inner circle. Bill said, recalling it all, quote, "They made it clear they could only convey our offers. They are not decision makers at all," unquote.
Yeah.
In order to get some real answers, someone was going to have to go to Pyongyang. Therefore, with the blessing of the Obama White House, Bill Richardson and his senior advisor Mickey Bergman negotiated a visit by promising to discuss private humanitarian aid for North Korean flood victims, along with Otto's release.
Okay.
Mickey Bergman was chosen as the representative who would go, as he was a former Israeli paratrooper with a therapist-sensitive demeanour. Bill Richardson going would have drawn too much attention. In September of 2016, so bear in mind he was arrested on the 2nd of January, we're in September.
This is nearly a year.
7 months? 8 months. 8 months later.
That's fucking crazy.
In September of 2016, Mickey achieved what he described as the first face-to-face meeting between American and North Korean representatives in Pyongyang in nearly 2 years. Diplomatic missions to North Korea are different to those from other countries. Meeting in other countries tend to take place across from each other at oak tables. However, in Pyongyang, Bergman was escorted around for 4 days to many of the same places that Otto had been during his touring. As Bergman chatted with his guides, he knew that his informal offers were being conveyed up the chain. I suppose much the same meaning, really, actually. Up the chain. By the time Bergman got to sit down with a vice minister on his last day, he was hoping and expecting a positive outcome because of the excitement of his minders. Unfortunately, Bergman was told he would not even get to see Otto. Afterwards, his handlers reminded him it takes 100 hacks to take down a tree. Of course, Bergman was hoping he would not have to travel to Pyongyang another 99 times. Bergman left with the impression that the North Koreans were considering ways that Otto could be released, but that first they wanted to see what happened with the climaxing 2016 presidential campaign.
Of course.
Yes. When Trump won the election, Mickey Bergman and Bill Richardson saw a golden opportunity to free Otto, like with the release of American hostages in Iran at the beginning of Ronald Reagan's inaugural presidential term. The two fringe diplomats put together a photo-op-worthy opportunity proposal for the Trump place to pick up. For the Trump place. For the Trump place, what does that even mean? For the Trump administration, I suppose, or the Trumps to pick up Otto before. Oh, I got it now. Sorry, typo. Let's start again.
Okay.
The two fringe diplomats put together a photo-op-worthy opportunity proposal for the Trump plane to pick up Otto before the inauguration, before bureaucracy had set into the new president. They didn't receive...
I think it had set in before he got elected, to be honest, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Ooh, not the microphone again.
I didn't even touch it that time.
No, I think it's just sliding.
Yeah.
So he put together a photo-op worthy
opportunity, you know, with the suggestion of the Trump plane to pick up, go for Otto. Yes. They didn't receive a no from North Korea, which is a sign of positive interest based on past diplomacy with North Korea. Bergman said, quote, "The challenge that we had was that we could not get Donald Trump. We tried to go through Giuliani, Pence, Ivanka, nothing during the transition. I'm assuming they were in chaos over there. Mm-hmm. I don't think it ever crossed his desk because I think he would have actually liked it." Unquote. And I think that is probably something Donald Trump would probably have liked to have been involved with, in the sense that he's such a Republican, all-American. This is an all-American family. There's an American citizen stuck in North Korea, of all places. He needs to be brought back and we're going to do whatever. But obviously never got to him because it was a crazy time, I suppose. After the election, Robert King, who remember, worked for the State Department and was in charge of the formal side of things, not the fringe diplomacy. He transitioned into retirement. Otto's case was then taken up by Joseph Yun, the newly appointed US Special Representative for North Korea policy. When Joseph came in, Pyongyang was still refusing to speak to the Obama administration, but soon after the day of Trump's inauguration, Joseph established contact with the New York Channel about releasing Otto. So, remember, that's our fringe diplomacy. By the 17th of February 2017, a delegation of North Koreans was supposed to visit the US, but then Kim Jong-un orchestrated the assassination of his half-brother with a chemical weapon in an international airport, which drew strong criticism from America impeding the talks. I actually remember that.
Was that only in 2017? I feel like that was way longer ago.
Yeah. But it's also crazy that I never heard once of Otto Warmbier, and this was all going around then.
Yeah. No, I thought this was going to be a case from like ages and ages and ages ago. Like, I was really surprised when you said it was like 2016. And at this point now, he's been there for a year. Yeah,
17th February, a year and
like 2 weeks.
A year and 6 weeks.
6 weeks. Oh, fuck, it was January, yeah.
And obviously, this drew, like I said, strong criticism from America, which impeded the talks. However, by April of 2017, relations had thawed to the point that Joseph Yun was able to convince Secretary Tillerson to let him discuss freeing Otto face-to-face with senior North Korean officials, on the terms that no broader diplomacy was done. You're only going about that, basically. Joseph travelled to Norway to meet with several high-level North Korean officials on the sidelines of secret nuclear negotiations conducted by retired diplomats to get around the lack of official contact. Joseph and the North Koreans agreed that the Swedish ambassador could visit Otto and 3 other Americans who were detained in North Korea. Ultimately, the proxy was reportedly only allowed to see one detainee, and it wasn't Otto. Joseph continued to demand access to Otto, and one day in early June of 2017 he was surprised by a call urgently requesting him to meet with the New York Channel. In Manhattan, the North Koreans told Joseph that Otto was unconscious. Joseph said, quote, "I was completely shocked," unquote. He argued that given Otto's health, Pyongyang had to free him quickly on humanitarian grounds. Joseph said, quote, "I came back immediately and I told Secretary Tillerson, and we determined at the time that we needed to get him and the other prisoners out as soon as possible, and I should contact Pyongyang and say I wanted to come right away," unquote. When President Trump found out about Otto's condition, he doubled down on the order for Joseph Yun to hastily get to Pyongyang and bring Otto home. The North Koreans were unilaterally informed that an American plane would land in Pyongyang soon, and that the United States diplomats and doctors would get off. A State Department official who was involved in the case but not authorised to speak on the record said, quote, "The President was very invested in bringing Otto home. Listening to him deliberate on this, he sounded to me a lot more like a dad," unquote. The official also said, quote unquote, "We were also very scared." And I suppose the reason was because even though the North Koreans eventually said the plane would be able to land, nobody knew what kind of welcome the Americans would receive upon landing.
Exactly.
Joseph said that, quote, the North Koreans said we could send a delegation to see Otto, but that we would have to discuss some of the conditions of getting him out once we got there, unquote. Therefore, Joseph raced to put together a diplomatic and medical team to save Otto and get him out of there. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this surname. Michael Floekiger was used to remaining calm. He's the next part of our story case. Was used to remaining calm while fixing horrifying situations. He'd previously saved countless patients from everything from gunshot wounds to car crashes during his 31 years as a trauma centre doctor. Michael was also no stranger to dangerous overseas situation, for in his current job as medical director of an elite air ambulance service, Phoenix Air, he had evacuated Americans with Ebola from Africa. So, like, he'd taken risks before, you know.
He's probably the best person that they could have sent over for this situation.
Exactly. Michael received a call from his boss asking if he would assist with the rescue of Otto from North Korea. Briefly, he hesitated out of, understandable fear.
Yes, of course.
But he decided he wouldn't. He decided he would, as he couldn't, ask any of his employees to do it. He was like, "This is something I can't pass to anyone."
No, of course.
It wouldn't be fair, I suppose. He thought.
He couldn't, in good conscience, put his employees' lives at risk. At risk when he knew he was frightened with good reason.
And he was the director, so something like that best handled by him.
It's not something you can delegate. Yeah.
No. Once he had committed to the rescue, the 67-year-old waited for the mission.
Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. On a Friday,
67.
the final go-ahead from the US State Department arrived. Phoenix Air immediately rerouted its best aircraft, a luxury Gulfstream G3 jet that had been upgraded into a flying emergency room.
Nice.
Fancy.
That's impressive.
The aircraft had been in Senegal in West Africa before being rerouted to Phoenix Air's headquarters outside of Atlanta. The next day, Saturday, Michael and his team got the aircraft loaded and airborne in less than 2 hours. So they got it back from Senegal in Africa and redone by the next day.
Fair fucks.
They flew to Washington, D.C. first, where they picked up Joseph Yun and 2 other members of the State Department before flying to Japan. Upon arrival in Japan, they dropped off everyone except for Joseph, 1 other diplomat and Michael, as they were the only 3 who had been authorised to enter North Korea. There is no official flight path as well between Japan and North Korea, so the next day as the aircraft sped towards the border of North Korean airspace, all the Japanese air traffic controllers could do was direct the plane towards Pyongyang and tell the pilot to continue straight for 20 miles.
Specific.
Yeah. The radio chatter faded out, because obviously I'm assuming it wouldn't reach that far, and also North Korea's North Korea, they probably had blockers.
Yeah.
Faded out, and there was only static for about 10 minutes before finally a voice that spoke perfect English guided the plane's landing in Pyongyang. A bus load of soldiers escorted the Americans off of the tarmac, and the plane returned to Japan.
I wish the listeners could see my face during this case, because I've just been...
A bus load for 3 people.
I've just been sitting here with the weirdest facial expressions.
Yeah.
Bus load.
The Americans were brought through the farmland outside of Pyongyang to a luxurious guest house that had marble staircases, chandeliers and a full team of staff, even though the Americans seemed to be the only guests.
Interesting.
That day, Joseph Yun took part in multiple rounds of intense negotiations with officials of North Korea trying to get Otto freed. However, Joseph kept butting his head with the North Korean official's argument that Otto committed this crime, so why should he escape due process? In North Korea, disrespecting one of the propaganda posters, which are everywhere, is a serious breach of the law. The research organisation Database Centre for North Korean Human Rights confirmed a case of a factory janitor being prosecuted for bumping a propaganda picture off the wall so that it fell and broke. Andre.
Sorry, now. So he was a janitor. He was probably cleaning, and he
So I'm assuming it was
accidental.
accidental.
By accident and got
Arrested.
sentenced for it.
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck? I'm so clumsy. I would absolutely be arrested within an hour of being in that place.
Oh yeah. Mood though, same. I'd fall and bring 3 of them down at once.
Yeah, bring down the statues.
Yeah, the 70-foot ones.
You're just standing there like, fuck.
Andrei Lankov, director of the Korea Risk Group, said if a North Korean did what Otto did, they would be dead or definitely tortured.
Jesus Christ.
Eventually, Joseph had persuaded the North Koreans to allow him to see Otto. Michael and Joseph were shuttled to, the irony, were shuttled to Friendship Hospital,
Oh, Jesus Christ.
a private facility that often tends to foreign diplomats who live in Pyongyang. In an isolated intensive care unit room on the second floor, Michael was presented with a pale, motionless man who had a feeding tube. Michael wondered, could this really be Otto? The boy looked vastly different from the pictures he had seen of Otto.
Oh my God.
Michael clapped his hands beside Otto's ear, but there was no meaningful response. He was flooded with sadness as he had 2 children and struggled to think of one of them in this state. Joseph also had a son around Otto's age and couldn't help but think of him and about how Otto's family would feel when they saw their boy.
Yeah, that's awful, man.
2 North Korean doctors explained that Otto had arrived at the hospital in this condition over a year before. And showed,
Are you fucking joking?
and showed proof in the form of handwritten charts and multiple brain scans that showed Otto had suffered extensive brain damage.
Oh my God.
Michael spent around an hour examining Otto, but sadly the truth had been evident at first sight. The old Otto was already gone.
Oh my God.
Otto had obviously improved since first coming to the hospital, as he had a tracheotomy scar where machines had once breathed for him. Otto was in a state of unresponsive wakefulness, which meant he still had basic reflexes but no longer showed any signs of awareness.
Oh my God. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
Like, I was thinking, like, when you were saying earlier about how nobody was able to actually see Otto, I was thinking that maybe he was dead and they were trying to cover it up, but this is honestly worse.
Yeah, to be like that for so long and no one know. The North Koreans requested that Michael sign a report testifying that Otto had been well cared for in the hospital. Michael said, quote, "I would have been willing to fudge that report if I thought it would get Otto released. But as it turned out, he got good care and I didn't have to lie," unquote. Yeah. Otto was well nourished and he had no bed sores, which is an accomplishment that even Western hospitals struggle to achieve with comatose patients. However, the North Koreans were still not ready to release Otto.
Are you fucking serious?
Negotiations continued into the night and the next morning. Michael and Joseph were driven to a hotel in downtown Pyongyang, where 3 other American prisoners were marched into a conference room one at a time. The 3 North Korean Americans had all been detained on... the 3 Korean Americans had all been detained on charges of espionage or quote-unquote hostile acts against the state. None of the 3 prisoners had had any contact with the outside world since they'd been arrested, and they all cried and gave Joseph messages to pass on to their families. After only 15 minutes, each prisoner was escorted away. Joseph said, quote, "I was frankly disappointed we didn't get the others out. It was very hard to leave them behind," unquote. When they got back to the guest house, Joseph was once again arguing with North Korean officials for Otto's release. Joseph decided it was time to play his last card. He had called his guys to bring the plane from Japan and told North Koreans they would leave with or without Otto. Joseph felt that there was no point in dragging on and he was 90% sure they would release Otto, and this call would bring an action forcing them to do so. Soon before the plane was due to land in North Korea, a North Korean official announced to Joseph Yoon that they had decided to release Otto. The Americans went back to Friendship Hospital, and a North Korean judge in a black suit commuted Otto's sentence, so reduced it is basically what that means. The US motorcade and ambulance then sped directly to the airport, through open security gates and onto the tarmac where the plane was waiting. When the plane was clear of North Korean airspace, the celebration was muted, obviously, because you've got him, but the condition he's in.
Yeah.
The team knew that soon they would have to face the heartbreak of turning Otto over to his parents. Michael cradled Otto, changed his diaper, and whispered to him that he was free. The plane landed at Cincinnati's Lunken Airport at around 10:15 p.m. on Tuesday the 13th of June 2017, so about a year and a half after he was detained.
It's fucking awful.
Doctors caring for Otto upon his return said that he has not spoken or moved since arriving in the United States, and described his condition as unresponsive wakefulness or persistent vegetative state. Otto was 21 years old at the time of being detained in North Korea, but had turned 22 during his detainment. In a news conference, doctors at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center said that Otto had suffered extensive loss of brain tissue in all areas of the brain. The symptoms of his condition included no voluntary movement or awareness of surroundings. Otto opened his eyes and blinked spontaneously, but showed no signs of understanding language or responding to verbal commands, said Dr. Daniel Cantor, a professor of neurology and director of the Neurocritical Care Program. North Korea had told a US official that Otto had contracted botulism, which is a rare but serious illness that is caused by a toxin that attacks the body's nerves and causes difficulty breathing, muscle paralysis, and even death.
It's
and
Clostridium botulinum, isn't it?
Huh?
Clostridium botulinum. I remember learning about it in home ec. That's what causes botulism.
Yeah, it can be. You can get it even from canned food.
Yeah.
If you're unlucky.
My home ec teacher said you should never buy any tin or can of food that's dented. I can't remember why, but she said don't buy dented tins or cans because it can somehow something.
It can be like if there's a tiny hole in the can. I suppose
it can cause botulism.
And it can cause even death. And that Otto fell into a coma after taking a sleeping pill in March of 2016.
Where did he get a sleeping pill then?
Because I don't see how they'd be nice enough to give it to him.
No.
But maybe they gave it to him. But they could have given it to him if he was with botulism and maybe to try and get him to sleep. Maybe. On medical necessity grounds. Because it is said that regardless of that they do take care of foreign prisoners to a very high standard in terms of medical care. Okay. Even if you treat it like shit in the norm day. The doctors said they had no information about the care Otto received in North Korea, and even though they could not say for certain what caused his injuries, they found no evidence to support the botulism claim. An analysis of the images from North Korea of Otto's brain that was dated April 2016 suggests the injury occurred in the prior weeks. So before April, a few weeks before that. Daniel Cantor said, quote, "We have no certifiable knowledge of the cause or circumstances of his neurological injuries. The pattern of brain injury is usually seen as a result of cardiopulmonary arrest, where blood supply to the brain is inadequate for a period of time, resulting in the death of brain tissue." End quote. Within 48 hours of his return to the United States, Otto had a fever that had risen to 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Doctors confirmed to Otto's parents, Fred and Cindy, that their son would never be cognizant again. Therefore, Fred and Cindy directed that his feeding tube be removed. Otto's parents lived at his bedside until Otto died only 6 days after returning home.
That's awful. Like, that must have been such a heartbreaking decision for them to make.
And I'm just like, also, because obviously with the whole, I'm big, as we all have, I mentioned before, and same with you, I'm big into the whole spirituality thing, so I'm like, was he in that condition for the whole for the bones of the year and a half, like, and like, can your soul leave your body when you're stuck like that? Because I would not want to be stuck in my body. Yeah. I'm assuming you could. I'd like to think from a spiritual perspective that he was able to, even though his body was still alive, that he was able to live in some sort of spirit world sense. And I know some of you listening probably think I'm cuckoo, but...
Yeah, but I suppose the only thing that I can think is not positive, not good, but like... The only thing that I can think is that because he was essentially brain dead, I don't know if that's the correct term, but that's the only term that's coming to mind for me.
Yeah, like he wasn't brain dead.
He wasn't aware of the fact that he was bedbound, or that he was.
But like, when someone's but that's what I'm wondering, because I'm like, when someone reaches a point of, how they'll never be cognizant again, how do we know that there's not something going on internally, like as in that they're still conscious internally to some extent?
Well, I suppose because there would be no brainwaves.
But it's not brain activity. It's no reaction or response to talking. That's brain death you're thinking of. They're two different things.
Oh, sorry. I thought
when you're brain dead, you need to be kept on life support and everything, or else your body will stop because your brain's not telling the rest of you. Whereas he only had a feeding tube. And at some period in time, he had a tracheotomy scar, so at one point there was a machine breathing for him. Yeah. But he obviously
able to breathe again.
Yeah, so he wasn't brain dead. So, I'm like, how can you not tell that you're still having thoughts and still trapped in your own body? Yeah. Unless someone was to manage to somehow recover from that and then be able to tell us.
Yeah, I think that has happened in rare cases.
But then those that recovered were obviously able to think while they were there, because you weren't gone. So I'm like, it's almost like being in prison in your own body is the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't even have words.
Yeah. Hundreds of people lined the streets as Otto's hearse passed, and many of them made the W hand gesture representing his high school. After a period of mourning, Fred and Cindy Warmbier appeared on Fox and Friends in September of 2017. They knew that President Trump watched Fox and were hoping to catch his attention. They called the North Koreans terrorists who had intentionally injured their son. Fred graphically described damage to Otto's teeth and foot as the result of torture and demanded that the administration punish the dictatorship. Soon after, President Trump showed his approval, in typical Trump fashion, by tweeting, "Great interview," and noting that Otto was, quote-unquote, tortured beyond belief by North Korea. To push for the United States to take legal action against North Korea, Fred hired the lawyer who was representing Vice President Mike Pence in the Special Counsel's Russia investigation. Do you know, the investigation about the fixed election and that kind of thing? So, that must have been expensive.
I would imagine.
But obviously, though, if it was me and it was my child, I would gather every bit of money that I could to do the same.
Oh, absolutely.
In early November, so this is 2017 still, in early November, Congress backed banking restrictions against North Korea that were named for Otto, and later in November, President Trump designated North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism, which would allow harsher future sanctions, Trump stated. Trump stated, quote, "As we take this action today, our thoughts turn to Otto Warmbier," unquote. Yes. At around the same time as Otto's death, US hostilities with North Korea were getting heated. This was a time of fire and fury, and of Trump and Kim comparing who had the bigger and more powerful nuclear buttons. Behind the scenes in Washington, diplomats who supported discussion or other peaceful solutions, like Joseph Yun, were replaced by those who supported the use of force, such as John Bolton, one of the architects of the Iraq War.
Jesus Christ.
The likelihood of
Jesus Christ!
Yeah. The likelihood of conflict was growing so real that an American diplomat in confidence had warned a friend living in Seoul, to move his assets out of South Korea. Or did that say North Korea? I don't know. But move your assets wherever they were being moved from.
Whichever part of Korea.
Wherever Seoul is. On television, social media and in official speeches, Republican officials cited the death of Otto as a reason Kim Jong-un needed to be confronted. When making a case for a forceful response against North Korea to the South Korean National Assembly in November of 2017, President Trump said that their common enemy had, quote, tortured Otto Warmbier, ultimately leading to that fine young man's death, unquote. In January of 2018, in his State of the Union address, Trump pledged to keep maximum pressure on North Korea and to honour Otto's memory with total American resolve, while Otto's parents cried in the gallery. Fred and Cindy Warmbier travelled the US to reinforce the narrative that Otto was tortured. Cindy had told the United Nations in New York City, "I can't let Otto die in vain." In April of 2018, Fred and Cindy, seeking damages, filed a lawsuit alleging that North Korea, quote, brutally tortured and murdered, unquote, their son. Even though Trump and his administration backed and boosted the narrative that Otto was physically tortured, the evidence was not clear-cut. Yeah. The day after the Warmbiers had gone on national television to state that Otto had been systematically tortured and intentionally injured, Dr. Lakshmi Kode Samarko, a coroner who examined Otto, unexpectedly called a press conference. Samarko explained that she had not previously called a conference out of respect for the Warmbiers, but that her findings and those of the doctors who attended to Otto contradicted the Warmbiers' assertions. Fred Warmbier had described Otto's teeth as having been rearranged with pliers, but Samarko clarified that the post-mortem exam concluded that the teeth were natural and in good repair. Okay. She also said she found no significant scars, dismissing the one on his foot as not definitively indicative of anything. Mm-hmm. There was also a lack of any other signs of physical trauma. Both sides of Otto's brains had suffered simultaneously, meaning it had been starved of oxygen. If he had received blows to the head, the brain damage would have likely been asymmetrical rather than universal. The Warmbiers declined a surgical autopsy, but non-invasive scans found no hairline bone fractures or any other evidence of prior trauma. Samarko said, "His body was in excellent condition. I'm sure he had to have round-the-clock care to be able to maintain the skin in the condition it was in." Mm-hmm. When Samarko was asked about the claims being made by Fred and Cindy, she answered, "They're grieving parents. I can't really make comments on what they said or their perceptions. But here in this office we depend on science for our conclusions," unquote. Yeah. 3 other people who had close contact with Otto on his return also said they did not notice any physical signs consistent with torture. The cause of Otto's injuries remained a mystery. Samarco said, "We're never going to know unless the people who were there at the time it happened would come forward and say, this is what happened."
Yeah, they're not going to.
No.
I do feel for his parents, though. Like, it must have been an absolutely terrible situation for them.
Yeah.
Like,
but I feel for them, but I also don't get why you would want to even make up
yeah,
the things about that, like for that image to be in your head.
I suppose they were trying to get their son home for over a year.
Like, don't get me wrong, there's obviously definitely mental torture, mental
Yeah,
and emotional and psychic, like psyche trauma, like, but
I think maybe they were just really angry and they needed somewhere to
as much ammunition as possible.
They needed somewhere to place the blame, and I don't know, maybe it eased things for them a little bit.
No, but I'm not disputing them.
Oh no, I know you're not
or
trying to
do
say
you know
they're,
his,
like,
the fact that he was
anything,
abused,
but I
why?
also don't understand why they're spreading this information.
Yeah, why
about
add legs and tails to the story? Like, because you can
It's like a teacher's
everything, like
doctrine.
the way the situation was, full stop, is more than enough to take action.
Yeah.
But again, not judging them, they were grieving parents. Do you know, I'm just curious more than anything.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Or like what led them to that, who put that in their head or told them that happened for them to maybe even believe it and not make it up. You know. Now, I know there is something I mentioned later, I think, actually, where it was mentioned once by somewhere, but it was only mentioned once. I'll get into it when I get to it. Okay. Finding out the truth of the events that take place in North Korea is a task that even American intelligence agencies struggle with. However, Otto's experience after his arrest is not a black hole. Through intelligence sources, government officials and senior-level North Korean defectors, and taking from the experience of the other 15 Americans who since 1996 have been imprisoned in North Korea, some in the same places as Otto was held, it is possible to describe Otto's probable day-to-day life there. So again, this is not definitive, but very likely.
It's kind of what's pieced together.
Yeah, from other people who've been in his shoes and gotten out of there, and people who've defected and things like that.
Okay.
Right. So, inside of the electrified fences of many of North Korea's infamous prison camps are up to... Right, this is just a bit of info more than anything.
Okay.
And wait till you hear this. Are up to 120,000 people condemned for infractions that are as minor as watching banned South Korean soap operas.
Are you...
Could you imagine if the Irish government put you in a hard labour camp because you watched EastEnders?
I would make their lives a misery.
No, they'd make yours a livery. You might die.
I think you underestimate me.
No, I think you underestimate North Korea.
Oh no, I'm not referencing North Korea. I would die in North Korea, but if it was the Irish government, I would make their lives a fucking misery. You cunts. And I think we can agree the Irish government are already making everyone's lives a misery, so...
I think every country's government is making everyone's life a misery, except for maybe like one odd country here and there.
The whole world is in the same ship, and it is sinking fast.
For more information, see the Titanic episode.
Yeah, and it's on fire. And I can't swim.
Oh yeah. The abuse of human rights within these, you know, camps, has been extensively documented, making a compelling case that they are among the worst places in the world. Those considered lucky survive on starvation rations while enduring routine beatings and dangerous enforced labours, such as coal mining.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The unlucky are tortured to death. In Seoul...
Take a shot for every time I've said Jesus Christ in this episode. Jesus Seoul, fucking Christ.
It's so bad, like, it's inhumane.
It is the height of inhumanity.
It's not even the word for it, to be honest.
No.
It's that bad. In Seoul, one North Korean woman who had survived 3 years in a low-level camp as punishment for attempting to flee the country,
oh my God,
cried as she told Doug Bok-Clark of GQ, "North Korean prisons are actually hell. We had less rights than a dog. They often beat us and we were so hungry we would catch mice in our cell to eat."
Oh my God.
The woman also said she would see 6 to 8 fellow prisoners die every day.
Oh my God.
However, American detainees escaped that fate. When Otto finally opened his eyes, he was likely at a guest house, which is where the State Department believed he was probably kept. At least 5 American detainees in the past had been imprisoned in a 2-storey building with a green-tiled roof in a gated alleyway behind a restaurant in downtown Pyongyang that is run by the State Security Department, the North Korean Secret Police. Others have been kept at a different guest house, and at least 3 have stayed at a hotel. By local standards, the most used guest house is considered luxurious. Detainees can hear guards using karaoke machines late into the night.
Stop.
But Otto would have likely found his 2-room suite the rough equivalent of what you would find in a basic hotel. However nice the suite may have been, it was still a cell, where he would have only been allowed out of for an occasional escorted walk. And I'm assuming that's if lucky.
Yeah.
For the next 2 months until his forced confession, Otto would have likely been relentlessly interrogated. Kenneth Bay, an American missionary, said he was questioned up to 15 hours a day.
Oh my god, and you'd be so exhausted, you would actually, you would confess to anything.
Oh yeah.
You would tell them whatever they want to hear.
And that's what we're getting onto as well.
In an attempt to rest or to get them off your back.
Just to use their words as an American against America, basically, is all their goal is. And the goal would not have been to get the truth from Otto, but to construct the script that Otto read from handwritten notes at his news conference. Mm-hmm. In the past, North Korea has spun false confessions from small truths, and in this instance, they may have made a whole conspiracy from a souvenir propaganda poster that Otto had bought, according to Danny Grattan, who, if you don't remember from earlier, shared a room with Otto on the trip. So Danny said that he bought one. So that's why I'm thinking, because it doesn't sound like something Otto would do, take a poster off a wall, why bother? So I'm thinking that could have been staged. Or maybe someone did do it and they just pinned it on Otto because he had a poster that he bought as a souvenir from a souvenir shop. So word of advice, you go to North Korea, don't buy anything with propaganda on it. Because
don't buy anything.
Yeah, don't. Don't go to North Korea, to be honest.
Yeah.
Go home.
Stay at home.
Go to North Korea on virtual reality. If the cameras for Google are even allowed in to take the fucking photos.
I fucking doubt
it. No previous American detainee has accused North Korea of using physical force to extract confessions, but if Otto protested his innocence, he would likely have received a warning similar to that given to Ohian Jeffrey Fowle, who was detained 2 years before him. And he was told, if you don't start cooperating, things are going to become less pleasant. And I guess if you're told that when you're being held by North Korea, you listen and you do what you're told.
You're going to assume you're going to be beat to hell.
Yeah, journalist Laura Ling had wrote of her 5 months in detention in North Korea. I told the prosecutor what he wanted to hear and kept telling him until he was satisfied. Ever since the sailors of the USS Pueblo were beaten in 1968, there have not been any clear-cut cases of North Korea physically torturing American prisoners. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened.
It's just there's none that's known about.
And not a major amount.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it. A high-level North Korean defector that now works for a South Korean intelligence agency said, North Korea treats its foreign prisoners especially well. They know someday they will have to send them back. Mm-hmm. However, that does not mean that North Korea doesn't psychologically torture detained Americans. In fact, it has always tried to beat them down into mental submission. Some prisoners were repeatedly told that their government had forgotten about them and were given such little hope that they only learned of their impending freedom an hour before being released.
They really play mind games with them,
Oh yeah. While some previous detainees were allowed letters from home, it seems that North Korea denied Otto any contact with the outside world. His only break from interrogations would likely have been watching Korean propaganda films. The psychic trauma of all this has sent previous detainees into extreme depression and even driven some to attempt suicide. In the footage from Otto's news conference, he looked physically healthy, but as he cried for his freedom, he was clearly in extreme mental distress. 2 weeks after, when Otto was filmed after being sentenced to 15 years of hard labour, his body still looked healthy, but his expression was vacant, and he had to be supported by 2 guards as he was dragged out of the courthouse, as if the life had been drained out of him.
And I'm sorry, but 15 years for supposedly taking a poster off a fucking wall.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I believe that it was even him, to be honest.
No, that's fucking... Oh.
The next assumption... was that Otto had suffered severe brain damage by April. So that's going by the timestamp on the first brain scan that had been sent back with his body. Mm-hmm. There was speculation that suggested the tragedy could have occurred at a special labour camp for foreigners, where at least 3 Americans have served their hard labour sentences. There they were forced to plant soybeans or make bricks while living in Spartan conditions. Kenneth Bay, the previously detained American missionary I mentioned a while ago, wrote, compared to the average North Korean serving time in a labour camp, I was in a 4-star resort.
Yeah, that's bad.
It would have been more likely for some sort of tragedy to happen in one of the barbed wire enclosed valley in one of the barbed wire enclosed camps, I suppose, in the valley, a few miles outside Pyongyang, but Otto almost certainly never made it to the labour camp. Michael Flukiger of Phoenix Air and the doctor who went with Joseph Yoon and the other diplomat to get Otto said the staff at Friendship Hospital said they received Otto the morning after the trial and that when he came in he was unresponsive. They had to resuscitate him, then give him oxygen and put him on a ventilator or he would die. Joseph Yoon said the doctors were clear that he had been brought to the hospital within a day of his trial and that he had been in that same room until I saw him. Due to the coroner finding no evidence of physical abuse on Otto's body, and when you take into account the claim Otto was beaten originates from a single anonymous official who spoke to the New York Times, the theory of Otto being physically tortured into a vegetative state begins to fall apart. Out of the dozens of experts that Doug Clark of GQ spoke to, only one of them thought there was even a remote likelihood that he had been beaten. Andrei Lankov said in his Seoul office, "I don't believe Otto was physically tortured. The campaign to make Otto a symbol of North Korea's cruelty was psychological preparation to justify military operations." It was also pointed out by many experts that even though North Korea is often portrayed as irrational, the King family had to be, as Andrei Lankov said, brutal and smart in order to maintain its relative power on the world stage, especially for such a small and impoverished country. What motive would they have to lose a valuable bargaining chip, especially when they had never been so thoughtless before? To these experts, it made a lot more sense that Otto was treated like all other detained Americans and that an unexpected catastrophe occurred. However, despite the experts' doubts, none of them could disprove the intelligence reports indicating that Otto had been beaten. A senior-level American official who reviewed the reports told Doug Clark of GQ, "In general, the intel reports were wrong, as the medical examinations have shown. They were apparently not even correct about where Otto was or when he was beaten, for God's sake. Likely, the reports were just hearsay. Someone heard third or fourth hand that Otto was sick and that person decided he was beaten. The North Koreans have never tortured a white guy physically. Never." The official said he did not know of the Trump administration having other sources of information about Otto being beaten. Another senior government official told Doug, "I can tell you that I've been in a lot of classified meetings about Otto before and after his return. Beforehand, I heard some reporting that he was beaten, but it wasn't from the state or intel, who never corroborated that before or after the fact. But it's possible that there was intel I did not see." A congressional staffer familiar with the case, familiar with intelligence reports said, "Before we had Otto back in the United States, we just didn't know what was going on there. In the end, there was no definitive evidence whether or not he was beaten." The staffer claimed that the government never got further intelligence reports indicating that Otto was beaten. South Korean intelligence, which are generally considered the spy agency with the best sources in North Korea, found no confirmation that Otto had been beaten. If, as it seems, Otto was not repeatedly beaten, then what put him into a vegetative state, and why would the Trump administration allow these unverified rumours to thrive? As someone mentioned, it's a reason to use as an excuse for military operations, purely political.
Yep.
So without knowing the revised timeline of Otto's injuries, the experts Doug Clark of GQ had spoken to overwhelmingly identified some kind of accident as the most likely cause for Otto's condition, for example, an allergic reaction. The likelihood that Otto's brain damage happened straight after the sentencing raises the possibility that he may have attempted suicide.
Possible.
It must have been impossible news for Otto to hear that he would spend the next 15 years labouring in what he probably imagined to be a gulag.
And he had no contact with
the
outside world. He had no
And
idea.
he was probably being told, after 2 months of being repeatedly reminded that the American government could not help him, he probably thought that his family and his Wall Street future were gone, lost. Yeah. What else was there in the future but only physical and mental suffering? Now, just because North Korea didn't beat Otto does not mean that he wasn't tortured, as the mental suffering the regime inflicted upon him constitutes torture under the UN definition.
Absolutely.
Thomas Ojea Quintana, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights for North Korea, said Otto's rights were violated on every level. And that is all I have on that. Now, I will say there was way more I could have put in that would have been even more of the political side of things. I stuck to keeping it more so about Otto, keeping the political things that were essential to the case, to the story, and things like that. But there is a good bit more out there if you want to look into it. In the resources, especially the GQ one, if you want to read more, there's a good bit more in that one that you can get, because I did leave a few parts out because it's already a long one, an hour and 10 minutes, and it's a solo case, so she chunky. But yeah, I personally am in two minds. I don't think, based on the type of person Otto was described to have been, I don't think he did take that poster off the wall.
No.
I think that, after his friend his sort of friend, because they were probably friends from the trip,
Yeah.
After Danny saying that he had bought a souvenir one, I think they just were like, right, this camera footage is evidence, so maybe someone else took it, or maybe it was constructed for them to target an American.
Yeah.
I don't know. And they just threw what they could and just went with it. And I personally think maybe maybe they gave him a sleeping tablet after the trial. He had an allergic reaction, led to that. Maybe he did try to commit suicide, and they found him in his cell like that, and he was too far gone, lack of oxygen.
He hadn't had oxygen too.
And then obviously they didn't want to admit that it was a suicide, because then it might as well have been murder.
Yeah. I just think it's a horrible.
But then again, I'm assuming on the medical reports there would have been ligature marks if it was suicide, because I would imagine in a cell the only thing you'd have to use would be something like a bedsheet or something like that. I don't think you'd have access to something to take. So
maybe there was something.
So maybe there was some sort of allergic reaction if he
to.
genuinely was given a sleeping tablet. But who knows? It's North Korea. They could have some sort of fucking toxin to give to people that fucking, leaves the system by the time the bloods are done. Now that's me going full on conspiracy theory now, but it is North Korea,
Yeah, I do think it's something that it's a case we're never going to have
a definitive answer
answers for.
But it is heartbreaking, and my heart does go out to family, friends, anyone that was impacted, any other people who've had that kind of experience in North Korea, and I can safely say it's somewhere I will never in my life be going.
Same.
Not that I ever really wanted to, anyway.
No.
I think I'd like to see South Korea.
Yeah. Somewhere safe.
And I just find it so ironic that they call themselves the Democratic Republic, People's Republic of Korea. Your people have no say, mate. You killed your brother.
Did you know?
The Muffin Man.
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man.
Yes, I know the Muffin Man.
Who lives on Jory Lane?
Yes. Anyway.
Well.
Did you know that apparently...
She's married to the Muffin Man.
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man!
She's married to the Muffin Man.
Anyway.
Anyhow. Did you know Kim Jong-un, part of his propaganda is that he doesn't poop?
Yeah, that's because all the shit comes out his mouth.
He doesn't poop, he doesn't fart. That's fucking weird. He's a weirdo.
Could you imagine getting arrested?
A big creepy weirdo.
Could you imagine getting arrested because you ran around North Korea going, Kim Jong-un farts?
Just going up whispering into people.
Yeah, but you know what the worst thing is?
Did you know your
the worst thing is, I guess that's actually not really funny, because if you did get caught saying that, you probably would be in a low-level camp.
Yeah, especially if you're a citizen, you
get put in a low-level camp for a banned South Korean soap opera.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
North Korea just doesn't seem like a real place to me. It's wild. The whole concept is
like they said, like it was said at one part of the case. Basically, it was more like they were in some sort of weird reality, and not actually in reality.
Yeah, like an alternative reality.
Yeah, like in some sort of simulation almost, more so than actually in a hostile state. Now, I did see somewhere that for a while Young Pioneer Tours stopped, obviously after that, stopped going to North Korea. But when I looked up Young Pioneer Tours the other day, assuming it's the same group, there was North Korea back on it again.
Okay. So they decided it's safe again.
Well, maybe. Yeah. So that concludes that. And I'm dying to go toilet. So there's that.
I'm hungry and I'm sad.
I'm hungry. And my pee-pee's about to bust.
Oh Jesus, not in my car, please. Can you afford to get it valeted?
No, I cannot afford to get it valeted.
Whatever, valeted, whatever.
I like valeted, it makes it sound fancy. Makes me think of limos.
Yeah, but isn't a valet like someone who takes your car and parks it at a restaurant, like a fancy restaurant?
No, I thought that was valet.
No, I've always heard it said as valet. I've only ever heard it in movies though.
Same.
I don't think we have valets here.
Same.
Because I know anytime someone says they're getting their car
If someone tries to
cleaned,
get your
it's
keys to your
validated.
car to park it at the restaurant, don't give it, you're being robbed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, whatever it is, validated or valid, I don't have the money for it.
Yeah, so please don't piss in my car.
But you have won a brand new...
Have I? Is this the end of Colin the Corolla?
No, it's just the beginning. But anyway, right guys, thanks for listening. Like I said, there is so much more to it, a bit like politics wise and things like that, so feel free to look it up. Let us know if you find anything interesting that you want to share with us that we didn't that I didn't have in it. And yeah,
And as always, give us 5 stars.
5 stars, Apple Podcasts. You know, if you've got any questions, send them on. Any case suggestions, send them on, whether they're joint cases, individual cases. If there's any individual cases and you want to send them on and you want to specify who you would prefer covers it, you can do that too if you think there's any kind of cases one of us would do a good job with. But
Sorry.
what?
I checked my phone and I'm howling at a message from Dawn.
Oh,
Read it.
hang. Okay, I'll read it on air.
Don't read it out loud though.
Oh no, I know. Your phone just locked me out and I wasn't even 3 sentences in. That's a bit rude.
I would use my Face ID, but it hasn't worked since I broke the screen. It's the end of it.
Ah, yes.
Standard. Important.
But anyway, so again, guys, thanks for listening, and that is it from us. And yeah, same time next week, or not the same time if you're not watching it the minute it comes out at 8 o'clock in the
Listening.
morning. How dare you?
They listen, they don't watch.
They can watch the logo. Doing nothing. But anyway, right.
And next week it's my turn.
Yes. So, ciao guys, and we won't see you, but you will hear us next week. Au revoir.
Bye.
Bing bong.